And then this one is also from Knox Makers. If you guys may have noticed, I was collecting walnut scraps and shavings. It was for this. This one was just walnut scraps, and it came out as a really nice sandy color. Unlike the husks of the nut, it does not stain my hands, and it doesn't really get dark. But I think it turned out well, and it matches this one quite well. And that's it. Yeah.
How color fast? Like if you make a nice toboggan for somebody that needs a warm head, could I throw it in the washer?
So I haven't tried these two yet, but when I knitted up the last three that I did, so that was the one with grape leaves, goldenrod, and the walnut husks. After knitting them up, I blocked them, so wet block. So I have to get them wet, soak them for a little while thoroughly, and then squeeze them all out. And all three of them were actually pretty fast. I haven't tried them in like sunlight or repeated washing, but it doesn't come out when you get it wet, which was surprising. The walnut one didn't even even lose any color at all, which maybe isn't surprising because it stuck so well to my hands that it makes sense that it really sticks well. I think the sumac one might actually fade a little bit in light. I let it sit under a window early today, and I don't know if I'm imagining it, but it feels like the exposed part got a little lighter, but that could just be in my head. Yeah. Yeah, this is all wool. I've only ever tried wool so far. So different kinds of fibers need different kinds of mordants, so like the chemicals you use to make it stick. So I haven't tried other mordants. So far, I've just used alum, which works really well for wool, sometimes in combination with cream of tartar or iron. Apparently, you don't need cream of tartar and iron. It's one or the other. Yeah. I don't know chemically why. You might have to ask a chemist. I have no idea.
How long did it take your hands to come clean for the walnut?
People say like a month. I feel like those people don't wash their hands enough. It came off, admittedly I exfoliated too to try to get it off faster. It was like 2.5 weeks, but I think that just means my skin cells came off. But my hands I was gonna show that they weren't dirty, they're black again, but that's from the iron this week. We'll see how long that takes to come off. Other questions? Cool, thanks.
Thank you very much. Just a note as well, yeah, there are zoom, and if you hit the T and W buttons here on the projector, it'll zoom in and out. And also, if you're going to present something, make sure you're presenting it right here for the camera for our viewing audience. Continuing with the fiber arts theme, Brian is going to show some sewing next.
Came in a little earlier today and decided to whip up a tote bag for my daughter. And this fabric is back there in the kind of the hack rack for the sewing area. I had the strapping material in my car, and I also had the opportunity, since I had it, to go ahead and break out the seaming machine or attachment I've got and use it and cover up the seams on the inside. Did a good job, a little better this time than last time. And but then I broke out the embroidery machine there and went ahead and put a 4-color embroidered initial on there. And that machine's really nice. I really like it, especially the way it buries the threads and stuff. It's just definitely an upgrade from what we had before. So I know that Sue's hosting some more of them classes, so if you're interested in learning how to make that thing sing, just take that class. This was not used with Inkscape or Ink Stitch. This was straight from what the machine does itself on board. All right, that's really all I've got for you. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, Rob.
Can you show zooming up the handle connection to the back? Would you do the?
Oh, I just sewed it. I just sewed it on.
The classic.
Yeah. Not my best box stitch either, but yeah. And probably overkill for a tote bag, but All right, thank you.
Thank you for that. Coming up next, and I am reading this right off the page, Ryan is going to show better sewing than Brian's. He knows it's not.
Right. So last week I showed the start of my. Whoa. I showed the fabric portion of my top quilt, which I'm doing a backpacking hammock setup, and this is continuing my series. Let me see. So going from there, I showed last week a model that I had made in CAD, which demonstrated the kind of the plan form that I was going off of, and then wrapped that around the cylinder that is my body in order to give me this three-dimensional model. From this, I was able to determine what kind of volumes would be encapsulated in each one of these cells. After which, so this guy is filled with 850 fill power, whoops, goose down. Which turned out to be quite an endeavor. This phone isn't cooperating with me at all. What I ended up doing, though, was taking the down, after several iterations of trying different methods, taking the down, which down, for any of you who are familiar, it's like feathers, except, right, it's fluffy, poofy, non-structured, very insulating material. Hopped up a cardboard box and sealed it to a bag that I made for the purpose, which is sort of a mesh fabric, same stuff I used for my hammock, and then shoved the open end of the cardboard tube into my bag of down and put a vacuum, shop vac, at the bag end, pushing through the fabric material, sucked it up until it wouldn't suck anymore, until it had saturated the end of the vacuum tube, and then kind of pulled it down into the bag and repeated that process, just kind of working down into the bag. After that, took the open end of the cardboard here and passed it into the channels of the baffles that I had created. This is the spreadsheet that I use for a lot of my estimations, and it does a pretty good job of helping to understand kind of the structure that we're dealing with. I don't know why it's black on black. I'm not able to change it on my phone. So it's a series of cells. There's a bottom fabric, which is a windproof, downproof material. There's a top, which is the same material, different color. And then the black lines here are the membranes for the baffles, which are made out of a no-seam mesh. It will pack down a little bit lighter, a bit smaller than this, but I'm in a Ziploc bag that tore and not a compression sack. So something like half the size. It'll fill the better part of a gallon. Cool. Right, and it weighs just over a pound. And then, I don't know if you can see, kind of the internal structure of it. It will, it'll poof up over the course of about 5 minutes or so, and it gets really marshmallowy, so I just call it the mallow. And the only thing left to do on it is I need to install the drawstrings, at which point it will sock down over me and should get me warmed down to about 20 degrees, at least my top half. The bottom one's coming up next after my tarp. Any questions? Yes. Something like this, it depends on if you want to call it a custom job or not. If you wanted to just buy an off-the-shelf version of this, probably about $400. If you wanted to buy a custom one that was outfitted the way you wanted, probably closer to $6. And then do that again for the bottom quilt. Anybody else? Yeah. So this one should get me warm down to about 20 degrees more or less, and alive down to about 10, depending on what else I'm wearing in it at the time. I'm planning on being under a walled-in tarp, so wind chill doesn't really affect me. I'll be surrounded on all sides. So this is, in Tennessee, I would consider this a 4-season quilt. It does not have a mummy thing that you wrap over your head. So what you do is in cold temperatures, you wear a hat. And if it gets colder than that, you actually, there's a separate thing. It's like a down hood that looks like a baby's bonnet. But it's really poofy. Anybody else? All right, thanks.
All right, coming up next, Logan is going to show CodeViz readable version.
Hey everybody, my name is Logan King. A while back I showed my project CodeViz. Let's see. Which was a project to render text, bodies of text to one large image. But the thing in the past is it wasn't readable, so you can kind of see the structure. This is of CodeViz itself. The color's kind of popping out. I wonder if I can get the color to show up a little better. Maybe, but yeah, you could I originally wanted to do the project, and I've showed it off here before, because it's kind of hard to visualize the size of code bases or bodies of text without being able to visually see them all. And if you just kind of view like 100 lines at a time, you can scroll through it and you can see how far the scroll bar is, but it's hard to see. But I thought this was kind of cool. And over the past few days, I have made it, let's see, readable. So this is the same code base, but if I zoom in here, it's going to be hard to show up on the projector. You can go ahead and see the characters and read the text itself. So that kind of makes it more interesting. And some people in the past were asking, like, how, you know, does the, we're a little bit maybe confused about what this was, or like how it represented the text. So now you can actually see the text on the page. And yeah, it was a bit of an adventure. Apparently, I wanted to render it for a while now, but apparently rendering text is like the most complicated thing in the world. Computer engineers have decided, because it can be different sizes and the text can like be monospaced or not, meaning like they can all have like the same distance apart, or it can vary depending on the letters you put together, and you get different fonts. So for a while I was having a hard time doing it, but how I eventually found out, or found a way to do it, and this is the limitation of my project, is I'm using bitmaps. So bitmaps are just predefined sizes of text, and it kind of tells me like, hey, in order to render this character, the letter A, these are the pixels you do for that, and I can't really resize it to make it larger or smaller, and I can't get a different font, but at least I have a way to say like, hey, here's the pixels that represent that character, and that's pretty easy for me to put into the image. So I didn't use this bitmap. I used the Unifont bitmap, which is a project which is made by the GNU project, and it covers most Unicode characters, so it covers various languages and stuff like that, and the resolution is about 8 pixels wide by 16 high. And I guess going over it, here's kind of my first experimental image. Where I got it working, so you can see kind of higher resolution there. And then I was just testing the Unicode, so you can see here that we're using kind of standard American characters with various punctuations. It can do Mandarin and other languages as well. In fact, some characters take up like 2 character slots, so they're like double wide, but I don't have great reference to show here. And then kind of finally I was pulling it together just kind of into my test project of rendering a whole page, but without colors or syntax highlighting. And then then I was confident enough playing around with that I plugged it into my existing project. So I had this I could render before, and now I've swapped it over so it actually displays the readable text. So that's kind of what my project is about. Questions?
As you've done this and now you can kind of see the 1,000-yard view of your project, does it give you any additional insights?
A few, yes. Mostly it's interesting to look at third-party code bases. So, let me reload my playlist here. One second. So I rendered the Git project. Git is kind of a command line program that version controls a lot of code. A lot of programmers will know about it. And I find it interesting. Like you can see a bunch of generic code, but I kind of find it interesting. A lot of larger code bases will occasionally have like diagrams. And so just exploring that, I kind of found some diagrams you can go look at and explain like how commit merging works, which is a very programmer specific thing that it's talking about. But I kind of find it interesting to go, you can almost find like things that would be hard if you were just looking through code base. It's easier to find significant structures or like graphs or interesting things. So if it's readable, so going from a non-readable image to a readable image increases the pixel count by 64 times. So if you have a large code base, it makes rather large images, and those are hard to display. So maybe I'll do another presentation where I do that live, but you need a special image viewer to view those. So, one more question?
Different colors on there is that like delineate multiple files?
Yes, so it's a good question about the background colors. Don't turn on. So some of the individual characters have different colors. But also you'll see that some of this is like light blue background and some of it dark blue. And so I wanted to be able to show where files start and stop. And so going from the top left down and then left to right, every time it changes background color, that's a different file. And if it goes to the bottom, like down here, then that file continues on to the top of the next column. So that's just kind of a way to show that. And one thing I want to do is, I don't have it working now, but in the future I'd like to put the file name at the top of the file. So when you're viewing the file, you can tell which file it is. and then also maybe add the line numbers. So, but. Mhm. Yeah, so I'll make this my last question. CodeViz is I made it a command line program. It's also a Rust library, but if you want to install it, you can, and you have Rust installed, you can run cargo install CodeViz, CodeViz, and you just pass it a directory, and it will render all the text files inside that are UTF-8 encodable. It'll skip anything that's not. It's like an image file. But yeah, that's my project. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Up next, Neil is going to share a repurposed souvenir.
Good evening, all. Back before I moved up to Tennessee, I was doing a demonstration on wood turning down in South Florida. And after I finished, one of the people in the audience came up and said that they had recently purchased a house, and with the house they inherited a box of various wooden items that evidently had come from various ports and islands in the Caribbean, and wanted to know if I would be interested in having it. So never one to turn down a good piece of wood, so I said sure. And I took a look at it and realized that most of what it was a wood called Lignum vitae, which grows throughout the Caribbean, as far north as South Florida and as far south as the northern coast of South America. So this wood was used a lot for making souvenirs in the various ports and so forth. And I put the box on a bottom shelf somewhere and forgot about it for a while. And then several weeks ago, trying to free up some space in the shop, I pulled the box out and I said, some of these are nice, but some of these are kind of fugly. And then I decided this might be an interesting challenge to put it on the lathe and see what I can make out of them. So to give you an idea of what a lot of these look like, it's something like this. And let's see if I can, let me see, where am I zooming out here? Well, I think you can get some sort of an idea. Got a base, looks a little bit like a goblet. And the interesting thing there's actually two very interesting features with Lignum vitae wood, is that it's very heavy and dense, and also that by weight, it is 30% of a natural resin, which gives it a lot of oily properties to it, similar to teak. It is one of the few woods that will actually sink even when it's completely dry. It's that heavy and dense. So I put another piece that was very similar to this on the lathe and started turning it just to see what it would look like and what I could get out of it. And although this wood is incredibly difficult to carve, you can't do those long shavings off of a piece of Lignum vitae. You can chip off little pieces at a time. But on a lathe, this stuff turns beautiful. And so that piece turned into something like this. And I will pass it around so you can see a little bit better. And there is no finish on this. It is actually just sanded down to about 600 grit. And it has a natural sheen to it. And so now I still have some more pieces. I'm going to have some fun seeing what else I can make out of it. Questions? Yes?
When that stuff is dry, does it change size and dimension of the texture, or is it pretty stable?
It's incredibly stable, but what I have found, I've gotten some antique pieces of Lignum vitae, which, by the way, Lignum vitae is probably the one wood that more things have been made out of than anything else because of those unique properties. Really old Lignum vitae that I've gotten that were parts off of sailing vessels will develop very tiny cracks in it, but they are still the same size and shape that they were. Because of that resin that's in it, it will not shrink. So you don't get the same type of cracks.
When you're machining, are you using just tool steel or tungsten carbide tip?
I'm sorry, what?
When you're machining, do you use tungsten carbide tip tool?
This will turn, this one I pretty much used just high-speed steel, regular wood turning tools. But you can also use the tungsten the carbide inserts. You can use that too. It turns beautifully. I mean, you get these long, very thin ribbons that come off the tool. It's really nice. No, I mean, when I pass this around, you see this thing doesn't require any finishing at all, and it really wouldn't absorb much of a finish anyway because of all the resin that's in the wood.
Natural resin or?
It's a natural resin. It's, in fact, the resin in this wood is one of the reasons why in early England times, when they made the wassail cups, they made it out of lignum vitae because they felt there was some medicinal value to the resin. And in Jamaica, they actually take shavings of lignum vitae and, excuse me, make a tea for it, and they claim it cures tonsillitis. Yep. I'm sorry, I can't. Yeah, they can. I don't know if I'd recommend it anymore because I did read somewhere that it turns out that it is carcinogenic. So, so I don't know. Maybe wassail cups aren't made out of lignum vitae anymore.
Could you spell the alleged word I cannot pronounce?
The
Lignum vitae, whatever you're saying.
It's LIGNUM, and then VI. That's V as in Victor, TAE. And you would think that would be the Latin name for the species, the genus of the tree, but it's not. The genus is Guiacum, which is GUIACUM, sanctum, SANCTUM. So lignum vitae, what it means is the wood of life. Okay? Any questions? Oh, while I've got it, I'm going to do an unabashed plug here. We are getting very close to offering the wood turning classes. So keep an eye on the calendars. I've got to get together with Brian so that we can schedule the first class. The first class, really, you're not going to get to do too much turning, although I'm going to try and get you to get the feel of it. But you're going to get a lot of information, starting with safety, the type of tools to use, how the lathe works, and how to mount wood on the lathe, and just as much information as I can give you that I've gathered in about 40 years of turning. Okay? Yes?
Great, looking forward to those. Coming up next, Scott is going to talk about an astrophotograph.
Okay, I have found another time-consuming hobby, and I wanted to share it with you. How many people in here do astrophotography or have ever tried it? I figured there'd be some experts in here. So I am not an expert, but I just gave my first effort. And I've been following a lot of people on the web on this topic. And I like this guy in particular. He shows you how to do it low budget with no tracking equipment. And in this particular tutorial, he takes a picture. It's not very well showing up here, but he says just with an SLR camera, digital camera, no tracking equipment, just a tripod, he teaches you how to take a picture of like Andromeda from your backyard. And the trick that he uses is basically taking lots of short exposure photographs, like maybe just 1 or 2 second length, and then there's software out there that allows you to stack hundreds of those together, which gives you essentially, it's like you had a very long exposure. You integrate all the short exposures together, and it gives you the ability to gather in enough light to see these very dim objects. I went a slightly different route, and I was really pleased. This is my first photo last night of the Orion Nebula. And I was just blown away. That's a 30-second exposure. And it doesn't really do it justice here, I don't think, because taking a picture of a picture. But the approach I'm taking is I've got a telescope, and I've got a fairly sophisticated computerized tracking mount. There's the telescope. And then I have a CCD imager on the scope, and then another little guide scope over here. And I think the one thing that's amazing about this new technology is I got a little computer on top of this thing. It's a Raspberry Pi, and it's called an ASI Air. This is a game changer. This thing allows me to sit inside the house Don't have to be out in the cold. This is kind of like my tablet. Whoops, upside down. So I've got an iPad, and I'm controlling the entire operation from this iPad. It lets me align this telescope to the zenith or North Star. It's not really the North Star. It's very close to the North Star, is where the Earth rotates about in the sky. So you have to get aligned to that. This thing allows that to be super easy. And then it also allows you to pick what object you want to go to. And it knows what's all up there at any time or any place. And then after that, I guess the next step is the post-processing. That's where it gets really interesting. If I had taken a whole bunch of these images, and I'm sorry, it just doesn't show up very well. If I had taken a whole bunch of these images and put them into software that takes out the atmospheric turbulence and the artifacts of the imager, that's what you kind of call the post-processing. And that's where it gets really interesting, because there's people that will literally take 1,000 images like this, throw them in the software. It's called stacking software. And it looks at every image and says, okay, I know what you're looking at. I've got all the stars figured out. And I see things like that are disturbances, and it'll filter those all out. And then it also will compensate for problems with the camera. So it's amazing what a processed image will look like after they're done with it. It looks like a Hubble, space telescope type picture. Of course, now, why I do all this, I don't know, because we do have the Hubble, and we do have the James Webb telescope now, which can do far better. But yeah, I was just, I got to admit, I was really excited when that popped out in my first effort. So I was thinking, wow, this is doable. And this is with a full moon in my backyard in West Knoxville with horrible light pollution. And that's, I guess that's the other thing that's encouraging about this, is you can do this in light polluted cities. And so once again, I found another very expensive hobby, and I'm hoping to share with people that are far better at it in here, and maybe you can help me get to the next step. So any questions? Yeah. Okay, this one that I got lucky on this thing, is I found somebody selling this on Facebook Marketplace, and that is a Skywatcher. They call it an APO. It's got very low chromatic distortion, so it's got very good glass in it, low dispersion glass. It's a model 80 ED, so it's 80 millimeters aperture. It's relatively fast in the terms of photography. It's got a focal f5. So you don't need like a huge, 10-inch, 12-inch, aperture. And I have an 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain type telescope, the old Celestrons. They're suitable for different types of stuff. This thing's really good for low light, and it's perfect for like nebulas and galaxies, because that's about the right field of view, and it's got good light gathering capability. And then the mount is also a Skywatcher EQ6 Pro go-to mount. It's a really robust mount. It can handle pretty big payloads. So I've got plans to put my 8-inch Celestron on this thing and start playing around with it. So everything has its own, I guess, place. With my Celestron, I'll do more planetary type photography. But it's just a beginning. Like I said, I found an expensive money pit, time-consuming hobby, and I'm really excited about it. And but I don't have any money, so I'm trying to do it on the cheap by buying other people's used stuff. But I think what's really cool is the computerization, the processing, and I've even seen, and it's kind of taken all the fun out of it, you can buy a little unit that you just sit out on your railing, and it does everything automatically. And I go, well, what fun would that be? But they're out there, and they show people sitting in like downtown Manhattan taking pictures of galaxies and stuff, which I find hard to believe. But it's all doable, and even smartphones now are getting pretty dang good at doing some of this stuff. So, every night, yes, yeah. So a couple of balloons too. So, okay. Anyway, I hope those of you that know far more about this than I do, please talk to me. Oh,
I know you can rent camera equipment.
yeah.
Can you rent that sophisticated equipment?
I've not seen anybody around here. We don't have any really, telescope shops around here. But some of these digital SLRs are really spectacular. And I can tell you about a couple of models in particular that are well suited, and they're no longer like mainstream. Everyone's going to these mirrorless digital SLRs now. So some of this really good pre-mirrorless type SLRs are now out there selling fairly cheap. That used to be thousands of dollars. Canon, Nikon, they all have some models. And I've played with those too. That's why I like you can do it with a digital SLR too. You get some pretty spectacular results. Yeah.
Are people doing it with mirrorless?
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Some of these new mirrorless cameras are really good. They've got really good sensors in them. And they have the added advantage is they're lightweight. They're not as heavy. So that's the other part of it too. I've got a pretty heavy duty tracking mount. There's really inexpensive tracking mounts that you can buy very inexpensively. You can make your own too with, they call them like a barn door. It's just a piece of wood that has a motor making it rotate at the exact same speed the earth is rotating. So there's some really cheap ways of getting around the fact that we're revolving and the heavens aren't. And a good camera, a way to keep it tracking, it's really amazing what people can do, on the cheap. And like I said, some of these cameras that are out there, Canon 6D, 6D is a great camera, Nikon D850. They are now passé. People are getting rid of them. They're really good cameras, and they're good for regular photography too. So, okay.
Very cool. All right, up next, Keith is going to show a 3-in-1 cutting board.
All right, hi everyone. I actually showed this a couple of weeks ago. Zoom in a little bit here. It's the first cutting board. It's called a weaving technique, where you kind of do a cut and swap pieces in and out and things. And really had no idea what things were going to look like when we started, but it turned out at the end. And during the overview, I actually made a comment. My wife, who was a geometry teacher, couldn't really figure out how things were going to look at the end. So she was like, challenge accepted. And she sat down and came up with a design that I'll be showing now. And the whole secret to this is that you stack up multiple boards, make a cut, and then swap the pieces and glue them together and do them over again. She came up with the one I showed originally was done with 2 boards stacked up and cut multiple times. She came up with a way of doing three at once, and when you do it that way, you actually have 0 waste. So all the wood actually kind of fits back together. And this is the first one, right? And so the weaving is actually just this part, and then we stuck on the edges. And the second board is this one. Okay, and you can kind of tell it's the exact same cut from board to board to board. And the third board, once again, is the exact same pattern. So you're doing all of this with literally 2 bandsaw cuts. You have the first cut, which is kind of a sine wave, and then you shuffle the boards, and then you glue them back together, and then you do another cut, which is a sine wave kind of flipped, and that gives you those fish shapes. And and the only thing you have to worry about is you cut a very thin spline that is the same width as the kerf of the bandsaw. and then when you glue it back together, that compensates for that cut. So this is literally is a great starting. You know, she hadn't done a lot of woodworking. It's a great way to start with woodworking. I think if you've taken Woodworking 101, you absolutely could do this without, you know, all the skills that you learned in that intro course. You really don't need anything else, with maybe one exception, which is the ability to create this thin spline that's the same thickness as the bandsaw kerf. There's one jig you need to do that, but other than that, it's just a matter of using the skills you learn in the 101 course. So, any questions? Okay, thanks.
All right, and the last name I have on my list is Wes, who's showing hexagon sound panels.
Okay, so I've been working on this for the last several weeks, and I renovated my office, and I had a problem where I discovered that there was a giant echo in my office. And that was mostly because of the wall in front of me was echoing, obviously, all the sound on the back of the wall. So I started looking around for sound panels, and I liked the foam ones, but they're just so plain and really boring. So I started seeing hexagon sound panels. Well, they were really expensive, for about $30 for, I don't know, 12 or so, but I have this 30 square foot wall that I need to cover. So I decided to make my own sound panels, and with anything like in laser cutting, you start with cardboard. So I built this out, but obviously this one is bad because while it's a hexagon, it's not really a great shape of a hexagon. So I discovered that there's actually a mathematical formula for making it, and that's what it looks like right there. So that's actually a good one, and you can see the bad one there, right? So they obviously don't match up. So then I found some material called Sonopan, and Sonopan is a soundproofing material that's used in between drywall and framing, the studs. And this is what it looks like after you cut it out, right? Same thing on each side. This is about 1/8 of an inch. So then I cut out about 400 of these on a laser cutter. Yeah. And then this is kind of boring on the wall, right? You just don't want that. You want something a little more color. So I came up with these. So I made a template with tabs and cut those out. And then I got these colors, and I decided I didn't like them. So I went with some other colors. I got a black one that I really like. And this is some pictures of me starting it off. Right, so you gotta have your center point right there. Let's zoom in a little more. Right, so the red really, really pops on there. I like that a lot. It took me a while to figure out what kind of design I wanted. Just for these here, I came up with something like this, right? So now I've got 4 colors. I've got the black, the gray, the red. And it's a little hard to see just because of the camera, but that's green, a dark green. And then that just goes all the way across. That's the finished product right there. So I think it's a really nice look because when you're looking at it, your eye kind of transfixes in different configurations and different ways, and you look just slightly off center and you see different things. So you're almost seeing multiple pictures in a way in here. What I discovered later on was that Velcro does not stick to Sonopan that well, right? It comes off super easy. So late at night, I could hear these things falling off the wall, and I was counting how many I would have to go back in and do again. The other thing with it was that the spacing on this, right? I mean, it's almost eighth, maybe even a quarter of an inch, right? And so it would kind of wobble a little bit on the wall, and sometimes you see shadows. So I went with double-sided tape, and that worked out a lot better. So, any questions? Yeah, but there's way too many in there. I like that blue wall a lot. And so I really wanted to kind of keep that in there. But you're right, that spacing in there does not soundproof the entire thing perfectly. I never was going to get that way because of the dresser down there, or the cabinet, and the other walls and stuff like that down there. But I think it does make a big difference for the most part. Rugs and stuff like that obviously will help a lot on the floor as well too. So. Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, very good. So yes, there's the jig right there. 3D printed that out, and super simple. I mean, that was free. It took about maybe an hour to print it out. I've got it. It worked out really well. Yeah, it's about 3/4 of an inch spacing in between.
What's the jig for?
The spacing. So you can see in here. So that's all 3/4 of an inch. And I counted them up, and there's about 450 in there. So yes, I did have to super glue all of them by myself. My wife mysteriously could not find the other super glue gun, but I found it later on when I was done. So that was hidden.
How long did that take you?
Probably a couple months working on it. If I was really focused on the panels on these, this probably took a lot of time, right? This is all super glue. So I would do maybe an hour each time. I'd say probably 8 hours total for this. You know, the backing, the double-sided tape and stuff. But honestly, when this goes on, it goes on super quick. I didn't have the right count on it. It's kind of hard to count that much, I think, to get it really. There's probably a good way to do it. I didn't do that. I kind of just YOLO'd it and went for it. So I had to go back in and do a second round on the top, and certain ones I had to get some more material and stuff like that and everything. Material, I wasted some material on it, but really it wasn't that big of a deal. So when I did laser cut the cloth, I layered it 2 or 3 times over so I could get like 60 of them done, because I can only cut out 15 of these things out at a time, so I could get 60 done. So yes. I started going down that route, and not really, no. It probably cost me $300 to $400 for this, maybe, but it's custom. It's what I wanted. The colors are exactly what I wanted. I mean, $30 for 12 panels time, divided by 450. I don't know, 40 times 30. What? A few $100. So yeah, it's hard to say, but I think the next thing I would really like to be able to do, maybe in a couple years down the line, is get a picture and then design the picture on it, and then put it on a cloth and have it printed out on the cloth, and then take them off again and then put them on, super glue them and stuff like that. But I think a picture would look really, really nice. Choosing that picture would be probably the hardest thing I've ever done. So I can never get the right picture. Okay, any other questions? Cool.
What was the purpose of these?
Trying to break down the echo in the room. Yeah, so when I'm talking on the phone with someone, they can hear the echo from my microphone and stuff like that. So I was trying to break up the echo, and I want something on the wall as art too.
Did it work?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Very good. As a White Stripes fan, I appreciate the color scheme. And hexagons are the bestagons, as we all know. All right, that was the last name on my list. Is there anyone else who has something to share that didn't get on the list? Going once, twice? All right, sold. Some announcements. We have a bunch of classes coming up. If you want to get authorized in the laser cutter, there is a class this Saturday at 10 a.m. for that. The embroidery authorization tomorrow is sold out, but there are a few more coming up, including one this Saturday at 1 p.m. So if you want to make some of the stuff like Brian showed with the letter there, learning how to use that that brand new cool machine, that will be at 1, and I believe there's another one next Wednesday as well. I would check on the website for that. And then next Monday at 6:30 is Woodworking 101. So if you want to get authorized in the wood shop, that is a class to take. Also, after next Tuesday's meeting, we'll have a new member onboarding session. So if you are a new member, prospective, trial member, you are required to attend a new member onboarding. It's just a good way to learn what Knox Makers is, who we are, what we do, why we do it. So it's a good way to learn all that if you're new and just kind of want to learn more about Knox Makers. Other announcements, the Big Ears Festival is having a parade. They're kind of, if you've ever been to the Cattywampus puppet parades in the past, that's sort of being integrated into Big Ears this year, and it's going to be on April 1st. And it's going to be on Gay Street, correct? Yeah? Okay. And it'll be on Gay Street on April 1st. And they do the big parade puppets, the big paper mache ones, and they've got crazy decorations, and they make a bunch of noise and have a bunch of fun. So if you are interested in sort of being a part of the Knox Makers representation there, come see me afterwards. We're trying to get a group together. Costumes are required for this thing, or some sort of wacky outfit. Puppets are encouraged but not required, but it'd be cool to have some sort of Knox Makers group build. So if you are interested, we'll maybe try to get some build days together so that we can go and work on some stuff in the workshop, work on some costumes, work on some puppets. I've taken their class before, so we can kind of learn how to build those large puppets here and get it all decorated and stuff. So that'll be in the weeks running up to April 1st. So if you are interested, like I said, come see me afterwards, and we'll get it all organized. With that, I think that's all we have to announce for tonight. So with that, we'll open up the workshop. You go out and socialize and see what people are doing, and thank you for coming.